Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to a new edition of Urban Sentinel Live. I'm your host, Reggie Kearney. I want to welcome you to our Monday night show as we continue part two of Reparations. My guest tonight is Gary Hines, the founder and the producer and the man who drives that Minneapolis sound, the sounds of blackness. Gary, what's up, my brother? How you doing tonight?
How you doing, Brother Reggie? Thanks so much for having me back, man. It's an honor. And you are
Hey,
wearing
no,
your
it's an
Sound of
honor.
Blackness Time for Reparations sweatshirt to the nines, as they say on Broadway.
There you
Go
go.
ahead, style and profile,
There it
brother.
is.
Man at you.
I got it going on tonight. So last week we talked about reparations, the meaning of it, why we need it. Um, had a good conversation. Okay. Tonight we want to talk about, okay, since we've established it, we want to talk about how the government can go about paying us what is due us. Okay. In what form, in what shape should we expect these reparations? And we should expect reparations. So we can't allow the government to tell us no. Okay, we can't allow that. So we had to fight for it. So how should reparations, in your opinion, Gary, look to the community and to the country?
Well, Brother Reggie, again, the audio on this end was really fuzzy, so I couldn't quite make out what your question was. My apologies.
Okay. What should reparations look like? Can you hear me?
There we go.
Okay. So
All
okay, so
right.
we finally got it. So what should reparations look like? How should it be packaged?
How should reparations be packaged? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Online, and we've been getting a lot of Sounds of Blackness has at our social sites, Instagram in particular, but Facebook as well. We've been getting a lot of commentary, a lot of feedback, pro and con and anti, and everything in between about reparations. And there's such widespread misunderstanding about it. And this is all going to your answer about answering your question about how it's packaged. What we're trying to get those who have opinions about it and are interested in it, and even those who are not, to understand is that reparations is not only about 2.5 centuries of free slave labor, and actually closer to 3 centuries when you throw in sharecropping and peonage and so on and so forth. So that's one component, but there are three components because so many of the responses we get, Brother Reggie, are along the lines with the sentiment of this has nothing to do with me, and that was long ago, and it should, yes, even if I agree with reparations, it should only be for those, to the estates of those who were actually held in bondage, and not to their ancestry, their heirs, or any such thing. So they're not seeing the fact that there were 3 centuries basically of free labor, which was to our detriment and their benefit. In fact, the very ones who are able to make such a brash statement now enjoy what they enjoy because their ancestors and their foreparents were the beneficiaries of our foreparents' free labor. And of course, we received nothing. There's a reason that we're at the bottom of the barrel in health and wealth and education and in politics. I mean, you name it. It's not just happenstance. So reparations is about making whole in terms of the 3 centuries of free labor, but then the 150 years, even from Reconstruction through Jim Crow and Jim Crow segregation, the promise of the legality of the institutionalization of reparations was supposed to have happened in 1865. That's the second phase, from the centuries of free labor to the century and a half of Jim Crow and segregation, And then the more contemporary era, where we're talking about everything from disenfranchisement, ongoing dehumanization, criminalization of the people, the culture. That's when we get into redlining and housing, and how we were not allowed continually to even have the foundation to begin to accumulate. Not only people talk about wealth, but for us it was just survival. So still really just barely surviving. So all three of those components have to be addressed, primarily monetarily, but not exclusively monetarily, which is the other thing that people, I can't pay for this, and why should the government pay for that? The same government, of course, that sanctioned and benefit from it, not only the United States, but throughout Europe, and Europe and Germany in particular are already engaging in reparations for their participation in the transatlantic slave trade. So the packaging of it, my brother, has to follow those three components that we're addressing: the loss of wages and of a foundation from which to build wealth. The 40 acres and a mule that never happened. So there was no foundation. The Emancipation Proclamation set us on paper free, but free to what? Free for what? There was no land. There was no work. There was no food. There was no community to be able to base ongoing and established wealth. So all of that has to be addressed. So the package has to be comprehensive in that way and address all three components of the quest for reparation.
Now we have paid reparations in this country. If I'm not mistaken, we paid reparations to the Japanese for being imprisoned in California during World War II.
Yes.
We've brought different groups of people into this country. Most recently, the Afghans from Afghanistan, and I'm sure in their resettlement, they will be given some kind of monetary help to allow them to move around and live here in the United States. It seems like every time there's it just seems like we just get blackballed and we are forgotten when it comes to reparations. Because I look at it this way. Now, in my family, we've been able to identify a plantation in Warren County, North Carolina, where our great, great, I think, maybe great grandfather was enslaved. Okay, where he came from along, and it was like on the list, it was like 12 other people that were identified in this his will or whatever that listed the slaves and the farms and their names and stuff. Okay, when a person dies, that estate gets money. Okay, so people out here crying that they shouldn't be held accountable because that was a long time ago. Well, in the reparations, okay, let's go back and give it to the family, based on the list, the census list of the slaves on that farm, but it'll still filter back down to us because it goes to the heirs. Okay.
Yes.
So either way, we're gonna get what we deserve, But I think one of the biggest things we got to figure out: do we push the government's hand to say give everybody $10,000, or do we say give discounts on public education, or do we, like you said, help with establishing opportunities for people to buy homes? There's a whole lot of different ways. Now, as you know, in March, Evanston, Illinois became the first U.S. city to pay reparations to Black residents, okay?
Yes.
And they decided to distribute $400,000 to eligible Black households. But I think what it was being used in there as a way, an opportunity for Blacks to become homeowners, okay?
Yes.
In
that situation, yes, my brother, you're absolutely right. In Evanston, it's under the banner of reparations, but more accurately, it's really more housing voucher, because this is typically against egregious redlining that went on across the country and of course, including, and so they're addressing that specifically, and there's on record specific families who were denied and so forth. And so it's in the spirit of what we say when we talk about reparations, but it's really more vouchers for housing. So, and that's one component, but that's part one. Part two, I just want to say this quickly. When you preface your remarks or your question just a few sentences back, and you enumerated a number of different approaches, my response to that is actually it's going to take all of the above. Reparations and reconciliation is about making whole, and so all those different areas, it's not just one area, and so it's going to take all of that and then some to really meet the need and bring justice in terms of reparations.
Now, in Evanston at this time, they're getting some pushback from some of the leaders in the community, conservative,
Of course,
conservative nonprofits and everything. So they're feeling the pressure because, I'm looking through it very quickly because I didn't have time to read it. Some people aren't excited. They call it fake reparations, okay? Because they see it, even though we can see the bigger picture of it being reparations, some of the people are looking at it as a housing voucher program, okay?
right.
Now, we can't we can't mix apples and eggs, okay? It's not going to work. The country would never go for full cash payments, okay? Because it would be hard to figure out who would get the cash payments, how to give them cash payments, how much you get, okay? And I think we got to do, like you said, all the above. It's got to be a mixture, okay? Now, a professor at Duke University, economist, said the proper reparations will cost the federal government at least $11 trillion if you did it the right way. If you did say, okay, we're going to take, if you can prove that your family members were, brought over here as slaves and everything, and you've been here many generations, then that's how we'll split the money up, and be given some cash settlement. So it's a monumental task, but I think it's something we got to continue to fight for.
Absolutely. Frederick Douglass told us power concedes nothing without a struggle. And so it's an ongoing struggle. This is really another phase of the movement. And as we alluded to earlier, it's not a new movement, 1865. And every movement that we've ever undertaken as a people has had an anthem and a theme musically. And of course, Sounds of Blackness, that's why we wrote and recorded and promote A Time for Reparations, not just as a song at radio, but as an anthem for the movement. And that's part one. Part two, let me just say this too quickly, Reggie. In terms of, it will be exhaustive and extensive, the process of reparations. However, I would actually downgrade and downplay, when people make it sound impossible. There are several works, scholarly works. There are books right now. There are doctoral theses breaking down how this would happen. So it's actually not rocket science. That's the biggest thing that those who are opposed like say, oh, how can we can never figure it out. Oh, yes, we can. It's been figured out. You're not reading the documents, so let's cut that out right there. That's part one. So that, and it's documented. One of my favorite professors at my alma mater, history professor, Dr. Boyd, had an expression when we were studying for our papers and all that kind of thing. He would say, "Marshal your forces and document your sources." And it's a matter of record in so many instances, and so it's a matter of tracing and following those records and then doing the math. Part two of that, though, for me, is what everybody has to realize for those African Americans who may not have traced directly back, to having ancestors who were proper with chattel property. I mean, that there aren't documents for. They are still victims of the policies that reparations are trying to, or reparations would address and would redress, and so they would still be a part of the equation. And so that's too limiting. There are those who say, yeah, okay, if we can trace it, you have to prove. No, reparations is not about proof by the victim. It's about following the documents and seeing the impact of the policies and who it's impacted. And I think the ones that are documented, there may be a greater direct impact because it's traceable, but it's impacted the lives of people, of African Americans, whether or not they have that documentation.
Yeah, because if you look at losing my train of thought. If you look at the wealth gap in this country,
Mm-hmm.
we are at different ends of the spectrum when it comes to wealth between
Right.
Black Americans and white Americans. So that gap needs to be fulfilled also. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have to figure out a way. This is my thing. I don't want people getting reparations and being given money and they just go out here and blow it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know how some people are. Oh, it's time to buy big screen TVs. It's time to buy a new car and do this. We we need to build some type of wealth in our community, some foundations in our community to get us ahead in the game. And right now, we're not ahead in the game,
Right.
and they know that. White America knows that, so they keep they keep their foot pressed down on our necks.
Well, again, when we talking about the packaging earlier, brother Reggie,
Uh-huh.
that's part of the packaging, so that some of the reparations, both in terms of policy and and monetarily, is programmatic and
Mhm.
goes and it is invested in the community. So it's not all just about individual payments, like you alluded to earlier. Both need to happen, so that individual payments happen, as well as investment into the community, the human infrastructure that has been devastated by the lack by 3 centuries of free labor, and by
Mhm.
segregation, and by Jim Crow, and
Mhm.
by the Reconstruction backlash. And I have to say this, when we talk about the backlash and post Reconstruction and all of that, we definitely at the core of that, and that's the epitome of that, brother Reggie, is the over 30 massacres that happened
Mhm.
throughout across the country, north and south. Too often the focus is just on Tulsa, and I get the focus on Tulsa, but there were 30 plus other Tulsas
Mhm.
across the country where we were massacred, slaughtered, raped, lynched. I mean, outright bombed, community destroyed, decimated. And so any foundation that we were even beginning to create was just utterly destroyed. And so that
Mhm.
happened a lot more than just Tulsa. It happened in Rosewood. I mean, again, 30 plus massacres where the deaths go into the tens of thousands. Those are the ones that are on record. The ones,
Mhm.
and there were, of course, those that are not a matter of such a record as Tulsa. So at the core of that phase two is definitely addressing the horrific impact of the massacres that decimated our communities, and our even attempt to try to establish a citizenship, much less wealth.
Mhm. And in North Carolina, where I'm from, Wilmington, North Carolina, was one of those cities that had an uprising
Yes.
where whites tried to wipe blacks completely off the map just because
Yeah.
they were being progressive
Yep.
and had become entrepreneurs. They didn't like that. They wanted to keep blacks down,
Right.
And it's bad that the white community cannot accept their history and talk about their history. That it happened. Yeah, be ashamed of it, but talk about it and let's get this thing right. Because we need to get it right. We need to get it right. We need a payback. Like James Brown used to say, great payback.
Yes,
We
sir.
we
He also,
need that. We need that great payback, and
we do.
we need what is ours, deservingly so. I mean, you look at so many people lost land uh, during this time, because they were poorly educated, they weren't keeping up with the taxes, or they got swindled out of land because they were going to the country store buying seeds and stuff like this, and the guy was inflating the cost of what they needed. They come back with the money after harvest, and the guy would say, "Look, this is not enough to pay your bill," things of that nature. Okay,
Right.
so we are owed this. Okay, we are owed this. I don't care if my ancestors have been dead for 200 years. We are owed this because it was our ancestors that built this country.
Absolutely. And Brother Reggie, at the possible risk of repetition, so many of those that are so quick to say, this has nothing to do with me. I never owned a slave. This doesn't have anything to do with you. You never picked any cotton, are missing the entire point.
Yeah.
The fact that their parents are homeowners and their parents' parents were homeowners and have been able to accumulate and invest wealth that our parents and foreparents never had the opportunity to do because they worked for centuries for free. And then when on paper we were so-called emancipated, still every opportunity was denied. And so the people today that are many of them the most vehement anti-reparations people, and this has nothing to do with me, fail to realize. And you know what? Let me rephrase: fail to admit, because you know what? They know. Let's put that out there. Okay, they know, but they feel it's childish, really guilt, in just not wanting to face the history. Really pulling critical race theory out of schools, or pulling their students out of schools that teach it. Just not wanting to address it. Just this whole notion of America as being perfect, love it or leave it kind of thing. And so all of that goes to the fact that the very ones that think that we shouldn't get anything are the benefactors of us not getting anything for centuries.
Yeah, it's something. Tony had Tony made a comment in the box, and she said the first step is to prove whose ancestors were slaves. Remember, records were poorly kept for the lineage of blacks. One thing I want to say, my family, we have done extensive research because we basically start with oral history that was passed down to us.
Yes.
So that gave us a foundation. So we were able to go to the county, Warren County, North Carolina, and look through the records. And you have to do a lot of work, okay? But you can trace back, if you're willing to put the work in, you can trace back your lineage as far as you want to go back, okay?
Yes.
But you got to do some hard work. Like I said, we were able to trace our lineage back to a farm and a plantation in Warren County, North Carolina, that had a number of Kearneys, okay? That's a plantation on the last Kearney, but we could see the names, The only conflict we have on that list, there are two brothers with the same name. So it's kind of hard, we really got to do a little more digging to make sure which one is our great-great-grandfather, okay?
Okay.
Because of that. But it can be done.
Yes.
So it's a good project for parents and families to work with the kids, to let the kids know where they came from. It's
absolutely. And for us to always have that conversation, which, brother, I'm going to take a moment just to say something quickly, tell you an interest story, just to underscore why it's important to do just what you said, and in terms of talking to each other about that, even though we think, oh no, it's a long shot. And then I'm going to come right back to you, and you'll see where I'm going with that. So, oh my goodness, almost 30 years ago, Sounds of Blackness were blessed to be on the road with the late, great Luther Vandross. Okay. We toured for almost half a year, all over the country, into Canada and so forth. And one day on a night off, I ran into Luther in the hotel, and he, hey, how you doing, kind of thing. And he said, yeah, I'm going to go call my folks down in North Carolina. Now, both he and I are native New Yorkers, so I didn't know anything about him as it relates to North Carolina. And I said, get out of here. I said, my dad's side of the family I said, you know, we're both from New York, but my dad's side of the family is from North Carolina. He said, "You're kidding me, man." He said, "Where?" I said, "Well, Laurinburg, Hamlet, Rockingham. My mom, my dad's mom, we call her Mama." So I said, her people, before she was a Hines, she was a Conwell. And Luther stopped in his tracks and he said, "Get out of here." He said, "Conwell." He said, "That's my people." So we found out on the road that we were third cousins. You know, he had been on the road for half a year, but have that conversation. Now, is it a long shot? Yeah, but with the the nuances of our history, you never know. So when you guys started talking about Laurinburg, you know, it's like, brother, we gonna mess around and find out we related. So that's where I was going with that. I know that's an aside from reparations, but it's an important aside, you know, to have that conversation.
Yeah, and like I said, it's almost scary when you start looking back, because when you look at the plantation where my folks come off of, you got to be careful. You might, you know, you may run into a person you think that they're not your cousin, they end up being your cousin. You know, it's just that kind of stuff, you know, and that's how it was, you know. But yeah, man, this has been great to sit down and talk to you about it. You know, one other question I want to ask you: why do you feel that the radio stations haven't given your song the airplay that it needs to have? Is that a byproduct of white corporate America?
Unfortunately, it is. In fact, I've had some programmers, many of across the country, many of whom I've known for years, that have supported Sounds of Blackness. I talked to one just over the weekend, called me personally, and I really appreciated that. And you know, said, you know, "Gary, you guys have a great song here, Reparations. The track is amazing. The message couldn't be more timely, and we should be playing it. But you know, I work for blank blank, and you know, they won't let me play it," kind of thing. It would not be, and I've had that kind of conversation with PD's program directors across the country, that have said that what we used to call, well, what we still call black radio, and what it used to be, as I know you very well know, used to be primarily owned by us,
Right.
and now, as you alluded to a moment ago, is now primarily white corporate owned and controlled. And so the black radio that used to be our community guide and resource, and when things were going down in the streets, you know, told us what was going on, or to get off the streets, or to get in the streets, whatever it was, or and to be a part of the movement, where the rallies, where the protests, all of those kind of community liberation, consciousness type things ain't happening no more, brother, or at least nowhere near to the degree that they were. And so, you know, I give a shout out to the few black stations that have given us love, but the large, they don't.
So how do we get the music out there so more people can hear it and play? What should we be doing for you to help you?
Oh, bless you, brother. Well, I got specifics for that. For everyone that's watching, listening, streaming, all of the above, what we need you to do is to call radio stations, request Sounds Black, and tell everybody you know, tell everybody they know to do the same, and to go online to YouTube, the Time for Reparations video, give it a like, share it, post it. So we need that kind of support from public, where over that radio can't ignore it.
Okay, my brother. I'm gonna do it, man. I'm gonna tell my friends to get it up, post it. So you
Thank you.
can hear it now. So look, we've spent the last 2 Monday nights discussing reparations with Gary Hines, the founder, the producer, the man extraordinaire, Sounds of Blackness. And man, Sounds of Blackness has had some great songs over the years. And I love all their songs. And I consider it an honor to be able to have this gentleman on my show, this brother on my show, talk to us about something reparations. Now, before we go, like I'm gonna tell you, Gary is out there in the forefront, protesting and keeping us aware of what's going on in our world, in our country. You know, he's a black man, okay? And we're gonna give the props where the props need to go, okay? So Gary, I really appreciate you being on the show with me for the last 2 Monday nights. You know, we're gonna do more stuff together, and maybe we had to just do a streaming service one night and just have Sounds of Blackness on there and play this song and try to get it out to the masses. Now tomorrow night, for everyone who follows Real World News TV, please come back, and myself and Sherry Ann, we're going to be talking about the Haitian treatment at the border. That was one of the most shameful things that has happened in America since the time of slavery, okay? The way they treated the Haitians. It seems like black folks get treated the worst, and Latinos and Mexicans can come up from South America, Mexico, and get the royal treatment. But when the black man tries to cross the border, they will whip with a whip. And when did we see that at? Okay. Let me save my anger for tomorrow night. Okay. Gary, what's the final word?
Final word is stand up, join the movement.
Okay. All right. So again, we've had the last 2 Monday nights, Gary Hines of the Sounds of Blackness. Don't forget Real World News TV tomorrow night at 8:30. Please, my brothers and sisters, support the Sounds of Blackness and their songs that are going to lift us up as a community, okay? So, Gary, we'll be talking.
Thank you, my brother. God bless you, man.
Okay, God bless you too. Good night, everyone, and see you again next Monday night, 8:30, for the Urban Sentinel Live Show. Take care now.